Pretentious. Attempting to impress by affecting greater importance, talent, culture, etc. than is actually possessed. So basically, you're pretending to be more important than you actually are. I said in my last video that an anime or a story that acts like its theme is more important than its characters or plot, at the cost of the quality of the prior two, that anime should be considered pretentious. I should put emphasis on at the cost of the characters and the plot because prioritizing the theme is a normal occurrence. Out of the big three, theme, characters, and plot, which one do you think is the most important? Because when you actually think about it, none of them are. Theme influences the design of the characters, and the characters create the plot, which turns the plot into a metaphor for the theme. You may have noticed it resembles the structure of an MLM. Prioritization of the theme becomes a problem when the theme and the other two are disconnected. At that point, the only way to express the theme is unnatural forced dialogue about the message. This will, in every single scenario, come at the cost of the characters and the plot. But the aspect that makes Classroom of the Elite the most pretentious out of the bunch is the fact that it completes the prior two criteria and pretends to have a theme. The anime pretends to pretend. Can't get worse than that. There are of course the quotes in the beginning of every single episode that have little to do with the plot, but once again, it is the first episode of the first season that demonstrates exactly what I mean. The protagonist is never challenged on his assessment, nor is the concept of equality actually fleshed out in the story, which means the only reason it was there in the first place was to flex the author's intellectual prowess. Make no mistake, it does not introduce the theme, and it does not drive the story forward. It is just the author vicariously role-playing as a philosopher through his self-insert protagonist. What I find to be funny is how the author numerously tries to come off as clever with these extremely overcomplicated schemes, and only by mere coincidence do they ever go fully as planned. Here's an example. For the VIP game, Karuizawa, the VIP, and Ayanokoji swap SIM cards and phones. Then, Ayanokoji and some random other classmate swap phones, so that when they steer the conversation to revealing who the VIP is by everyone showing their phones, their random classmate will be the one outed as a VIP. If you're someone who hasn't seen the anime, you might be wondering, why doesn't Ayanokoji and Karuizawa just swap phones, or Karuizawa and the random swap phones? That's because the protagonist is omniscient and predicts that this student from a different class would just get suspicious and call his phone to see if he swapped with a random. It makes a tad bit more sense now, but why not just have the VIP and Ayanokoji swap phones and SIM cards, then have Ayanokoji out himself as the VIP. That way when Dingleberry Eater calls him, it would only confirm that he is the VIP to everyone else. But of course, the author likely believed that it wasn't complex enough to make himself look clever. As if he didn't know that brevity is the soul of wit. He also sets himself up for another subversion. In a lot of ways, the anime also tries to mislead the audience in an unfair manner. Like when the protagonist in her monologues about
the longer we take to agree, the more suspicious we look. Might as well.
As if the whole thing wasn't going according to plan. When it actually was. Or when he deduces who the actual card holder is in another game, based off a character trait that we aren't even made aware of prior. Just look at an actual clever series like Death Note. A lot of Kira's and L's schemes were not any more complex than they needed to be, even if their plans involved multiple traps, because in Classroom of the Elite, Ayanokoji's plan only carries with it a single trap and an extra step. You're not clever, you just have no confidence in your ability to subvert the audience's expectations. Like how you tried to subvert the audience's expectations again by revealing that Dingleberry Eater actually knew his plan all along, but went along with it anyways because why not, right? And yes, I will be calling her Dingleberry Eater from now on because I forgot her name. Plus, she's really dumb, so it fits. The scene that pissed me off the most in this season was the one where Karuizawa was getting Chris Browned. Not because I liked her character or the scene made me uncomfortable, heck, they could have OJ'd her, and it would have increased my score of the anime by 1. Rather, the part that pissed me off was when the protagonist, the author, likened this scene to the Milgram experiment. Not only is this scene an extremely poor representation of the Milgram experiment, but the protagonist completely misconstrued the point of its findings. No, it did not find that peer pressure enhances a person's natural cruelty. It actually found most people will follow commands from a place of authority even if it breaks their principles. The participants almost always pushed back on the experimenter's demands. However, they would often continue despite their guilt. You imply with this scene that people will lose their guilt and let out their inherent violent nature after a bit of pressure is applied. This is real life.
I don't get no answer. He was hollering on less voltage. Can't you check in to see if he's all right, please?
Not once we've started. Please continue, teacher.
Answer, please. Are you all right in there? Are you all right?
Please continue, teacher.
Answer, please. Are you all right? 405 volts. The answer is moon.
And this is a joke of a scene written by someone who thinks he's better than everyone else. When given the chance to embarrass herself, the show does not hesitate. The best example being when Koshida was laying out her backstory. During her monologue, it showed a frame of her in Joker makeup. The anime has now floored me twice. Once at the fact that someone this incompetent figured out that he should give his protagonist a goal, and the second was in complete laughter. How on earth do you expect me to take this crap seriously after the Joker frame? Also, since I brought up the goal again, I guess I should mention that the author actually ended up taking away that goal away from the protagonist. I would say we've reached the bottom of the barrel when it comes to anime, but I must remind myself that anime such as School Days and Kanekon exist, as much as I'd like to forget about them. Well, you know it's not all bad. This anime does have some good, which a lot of modern anime tend to lack with their overly optimistic view of friendship. This anime actually has interpersonal conflict, which makes it more interesting in a way that is different from other anime. Interpersonal conflict is great because it adds more complexity to the characters' relationships. It's just too bad that even with interpersonal conflict, the protagonist is simpler than a baby's toy. Before I finished the anime, I got a bit curious about what others thought of it, and after skimming over some of the reviews, I got a bit excited for the ending. They made the big boss fight out to be well done, and the protagonist ending in her monologue to be brutal. And you know what? After I watched it, I was left with nothing more than disappointment. The big boss fight was a completely one-sided beatdown because the protagonist is a Gary Stu. And the ending monologue was just the protagonist explaining the dentist system, but it's missing 2 letters. My point is that despite the anime not being ambitious in its presentation, it still comes off as pretentious. Because an anime being experimental is a terrible standard to set for diagnosing the anime as pretentious. This anime puts quotes at the beginning of every single episode even though they have little to no connection to the episode. The anime references studies that don't apply to the scenario. The protagonist has no goal, no weakness, underdeveloped core wound, no dimension, and no character arc. The schemes that the protagonists come up with are overly complex, and honestly, it is a miracle how they turn out perfect. And finally, the story is completely plot driven. It should be obvious from my little rant there that by far the main problem with Classroom of the Elite is the lack of quality in the characters. If you want to avoid Classroom of the Elite's character problems, then I highly recommend you watch the video on screen.